What's going on? Hey,
Oh,
Dorothy. Uh-oh. What
oh,
smells? The
oh,
dog?
Joy.
Did the dogs do something?
Oh,
Did you like have
I think
something
the
bad?
neighbors are doing laundry.
Oh, I'm so
Oh,
sorry.
one of the joys of living in the city is you can't get away from that.
Yuck.
All kidding aside, Joy. I this episode on fragrance wasn't even on our radar for quite some time. I was sitting out on my porch the other morning, enjoying one of those truly magnificently glorious New England spring mornings, face to the sun, drinking my coffee, feeling so
Uh,
grateful for the morning, for my life, for the day. You know, you get the drill. We've talked about this,
yeah.
doing the whole thing when suddenly I'm enveloped by what could only be the neighbor's dryer sheets. It was just, it completely destroyed my experience. I could barely breathe. And even going inside because the windows were open, I couldn't get away from the smell.
Boo.
So I was like, maybe we should move this topic up a little bit in
Yes.
the
Yes.
timeline. So here we are
And you know I love this
talking
topic.
about fragrance. I mean, I'm generally pretty good natured. There's not a lot in this world that makes me angry, but I'm gonna say I was not happy because there was nothing I could do about it, and they didn't know. They didn't know what they were doing was impacting my morning.
When you told me this the other day, you had a good example of kind of what happened when you were younger, when there was something that affected people and neighbors and such. So will you share that?
Sure. Yeah, when I was young, people smoked everywhere.
Yep.
Okay, yes, I understand. We've already established I'm old. That's how old I am. People smoked everywhere. There were ashtrays in all the restaurants. Airplanes had little ashtrays in all the seat arms, everywhere. I mean, the doctors, I would go in for my physical, and the doctors would be smoking right in there while I'm getting my physical. It was accepted. And, my dad he was in advertising. I don't know if any of you ever watched Mad Men, but that was my life. That
Oh,
was
cool.
exactly my life, the smoking, the drinking. He
Yeah.
was, he was Don Draper pretty much, aside from the cheating. Anyway, so smoking was everywhere. And then as time went by, more and more people were being aware. I think Christopher Reeve and dying from lung cancer, or his wife dying from lung cancer, kind of helped bring secondhand smoke and the dangers of it to the public eye to some degree. They kind of restricted areas, like this restaurants had smoking areas, the airplanes. I know when I would fly, if it was a short flight, you couldn't smoke at all. If it was a longer flight, you had to smoke in the back of the
Mhm.
plane. Doctors probably put their cigarettes out before they went into exam. Well, okay, I just
Right.
made that one up, but it sounds like it could be legit. Anyway, it obviously didn't solve the problem because you were still exposed to the smoke, but it was a step in the right direction of trying to protect people who didn't smoke from the people who did. And
Yes.
now pretty much you can't smoke it. There's no smoking anywhere except basically in your own home or maybe out in the big park or something somewhere. You
Yeah.
can't even smoke outside, right outside of the building. So, it's come a long way to protect the people from other people's smoking. So my question is, why can't we do something similar with fragrance?
Right. It's like secondhand fragrance when it's coming off of a person or the someone else's dryer. I'm totally on that same page. It just can be overwhelming and um, disgusting. And it's interesting, most people are kind of attached to those smells. They think that
Exactly.
if they don't smell that laundry detergent or that dryer sheet, it doesn't feel like it's clean. So we have been trained. That's like what clean is supposed to smell like.
It's true. We have all been kind of trained to, if we don't smell that dryer scent smell, the
Mhm.
bounce fresh or whatever it is,
Yeah.
then it's not clean. And we've
Yeah.
all kind of been conditioned to expect this overwhelming fragrance. And it's a real problem because fragrance and most people don't think about it. They expect their clothes to smell that, and even the commercials are like, I washed these sheets 2 weeks ago and they still smell fresh, or
Yep.
that gain freshness. And it's like, I'm going, it's like, ugh. But so many of us expect that really strong smell particularly when we do our laundry, but for a lot of other things too, our shampoos and our body lotions, all these things, we expect that smell. And what so many people don't really realize is how toxic fragrances are. I mean, over 90% of the ingredients in fragrances are petroleum based. It's another one of those things that come from our that petroleum.
Mm.
There are thousands of different chemicals involved in making a fragrance, and in the powers that be and all their infinite wisdom, they gave sort of a pass to these manufacturers under the label of fragrance. So if you see fragrance in the description of ingredients, it can mean they don't have to disclose what that is.
Yeah.
There can be thousands of different ingredients, different chemicals, different substances, and they don't have to disclose what those are. They can put anything under that label of fragrance, and it's proprietary information or whatever, so they don't have to disclose what it is. So you don't know what you're putting in and on your body.
And they're making that in the lab. They're making it to be like flower fresh and the great outdoors and the ocean, whatever they call them, all the names. And like you said, when you start to see fragrance as a listing, that can be many, many, many chemicals to get to that fragrance. And they design them so they last, like you said, like 2 weeks later, your laundry still smells clean. And you know, I get why they do that. That makes sense in terms of marketability of a product, but the toxic load is not good. We're getting, you know, too many toxins. We're disrupting our endocrine system, right? Our system that triggers our hormones on what to do can get confused just by being exposed to too many of these toxic fragrances. When I got into essential oils, people thought, oh, I'll give Joy like these scented candles and these beautiful scented soaps. And I would receive those gifts graciously, but you can't trust everything, unfortunately, that it's not going to have a toxic fragrance ingredient. It's just not good. Not good.
Exactly. Yeah, those ingredients, there's so many chemicals, and none of those chemicals, or maybe five out of the thousands, have been tested for safety
Mm,
individually, and let alone what they certainly never do with these and all chemicals is they don't test how, like, if this chemical and this chemical interact with one another, do they make a third, even worse chemical? Nobody ever tests for any
right.
of that stuff.
Yeah.
So you have no idea what these chemicals are doing to you. But what they do know is that many of them are carcinogenic. They are neurotoxins. They go and they cross the blood-brain barrier and impact your brain. Like you said, they're endocrine disruptors. Many of them are like they're xenoestrogens, what they're called. So they go and they bind to your cell, which blocks that cell from getting in real estrogen. So that's one of the ways that it messes with your endocrine system. So many of these effects are not something you might necessarily notice, like as you're smelling your neighbor's dryer sheets.
Right.
You might not notice it could happen next year, 5 years, 10 years. You might not know that you're getting affected by it but there are also lots of things that happen right away. Some people, it makes them nauseous. Some people, it
Mhm.
makes them as they have an asthma attack. It can have an allergic reaction. There are so many things that can happen right away when people smell these fragrances.
Sure.
So the effects are myriad and scary
Yeah.
for these things that most of us just take for granted in our everyday life.
Well, you'd like to trust that, like you said, that they're testing them. If they're allowed to be in products, we like to assume that things on the shelves have been tested for safety, but I think there's that loophole, right, where it can be generally regarded as safe. So it's pretty safe, especially at this, recommended dose or measurement. But really, over time, it can accumulate in the body and in the toxic load. We, you and I've talked in the past about the documentary called Stink with exclamation point, which we'll put in our show notes. It's available on YouTube. They talk about, most fragrances don't come from flower fields. They come from a chemical plant in New Jersey, which is true. And it's a good documentary to get people aware, I think, of these stinky chemicals and the things that are supposed to be marketed as smelling good might not be good for us.
Yeah, it was a really, really good documentary, and I highly recommend taking the 90 minutes it takes to watch it, because we have that faith in that we're going to be taken care of,
Hmm.
which is misplaced in my opinion, but again, talk for another day.
Yeah.
But we have that faith that if it's on the shelves at the store, that somebody has taken the time to make sure that it's safe. And that just couldn't be further from the truth. And Stink goes into a lot of that and talks about how that's not true. And I did enjoy that documentary, but for me, it had a couple of problems. In that, first of all, it talked about the importance of trying to hold these companies accountable for naming the chemicals that are in these products. So which of these chemicals are the problem, and let's make sure that they're
Yeah.
easy to be found so you know what's in there. So like if somebody's sensitive to a certain chemical, you know it's there. That's a problem for me because I don't think any chemicals are safe. I think if it's made in a lab, if it's formulated chemically,
Yeah.
not in nature, but in a lab, then it's not good for people. I don't think there is one that it's good for people. If you want a smell of a lavender, go grow a lavender plant. If you
Yeah.
want the smell of a lemon, get a lemon.
Yeah.
You cannot recreate it in a lab that is going to be safe and effective.
Yeah.
I don't believe that it's
Yeah.
possible. And
And
the other problem for me was their insistence and reliance on government to hold these big companies accountable for their actions. They're like, let's get the government to set the regulations and let's get the EPA doing what they're supposed to do. Let's get the FDA doing what they're supposed to do. Let's hold these companies accountable. And for me, again, I think that's a fool's errand because for every, like over in Europe, most of these chemicals have been banned.
Mhm.
Not so much here in the United States. They don't ban anything here in the United States. But even to the way I see things, even if like say take red dye that the one I think was number 5 that was recently banned.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, "Woo, that's a win for all of us natural crunchy mamas," right? And I'm like, "No, it's a distraction because they may have banned red dye number 5, but there's red dye 6 and 7 and 8 and yellow and green and orange and all these other things that are just as bad, if not worse, as red dye or BPA, like all the plastics, BPA free. So there's plenty of other plastics that they use that are just as bad as BPA. So these companies, if you ban one of the chemicals that they use, they don't care. They'll just use a different chemical that hasn't been banned yet, which is probably at least as bad, if not worse, than the one that was banned.
Right.
So I don't think working at the level of regulating the companies is really going to ultimately be the answer because they have so much money. They hire, the people that go to the government and say, don't pass this bill or whatever, and they have a lot of power.
Yeah.
So to me, I think we forget sometimes the power of our dollar in terms of voting for what's good for us and what's not. So my goal is to educate people, like we're doing here today, is educating people on the potential dangers of fragrance and some of these other chemicals. And the more people that make that choice to not buy these products, eventually the companies either will have to switch to more natural products or go out of business.
Yeah.
It's their bottom line is what's going to encourage them to change, not a government regulation, because there's always a way around those regulations to still make them money. What's important to them is making money. So if people aren't buying their products because these products are dangerous, that's what's going to be the encouragement and the incentive to change. So
Yes.
for me, I think for me, that was the flaw in the documentary was their kind of focusing on that aspect of change, whereas I would rather educate people to make different choices.
Yeah.
So that was, for me, that was where I kind of felt it was a little bit less helpful.
Yeah, it's true. And you make a good point. I mean, if it does lead up to cleaning up some of the manufacturing and enlightens people who don't think this way, don't always tune into the artificial scents being bad, you know, um, I guess I don't really need scented toilet paper and scented this and scented that because it's getting in your body and getting in your bloodstream and you don't want it. So I think if it accomplishes that, that's good. But you make a good point that if we focus too much on getting them to fix it, they're probably not going to fix it unless the products are not selling. I also want to switch gears a little bit and just point out that there's obviously ways to do what we call switch and ditch. So you don't have to feel wed to these products in our homes. Like if we can look at our own environment, sometimes they say like indoor air pollution can be worse than outdoor air pollution if you're using plug-in fake fragrancy kind of things or air sprays that are in an aerosol can, when you can do things like a little diffuser with essential oil that is natural and will clean the air naturally and smell good naturally without synthetic fragrances. Then you can ditch those candles that we all love, but just those are toxic. Those are dangerous to our health and our environment. So that's another focus too, is what we can do in our own homes to clean things up. What would you do for that lady with the dryer, the dryer sheets?
Well, yeah, you're so right about that. I mean, I can't even go near the cleaning aisle in the grocery store, even in
No,
Whole Foods where it's supposed to be healthier for you, let alone walk down it. It's like
yeah, I know.
yeah, I don't understand how people can, but that I have not been using synthetic fragrance for a really long time, so my body is now ultra sensitive to it. But yes, I have my little dry, and I made these
Oh, nice.
myself probably like 20, 30 years ago.
Dryer
So
balls,
I
you said?
made these. It's got to be real wool, so it will felt down into a ball. Don't use it. Well, you don't want to use synthetic anyway because you don't want plastics in your clothes, but use real wool and just make a ball at it and then just hot water. Anyway, you don't have to make them anymore. There's a lot of places where you can buy all natural wool dryer balls. And just if you want to add some, you can add like if you use for your sheets, you can use a little lavender. If you for your clothes, if pick a signature scent and put some of that
Nice.
in. If you have pets like dogs, I don't particularly like the smell of this one, but it does take some of those doggy smells out of your things. That's what I like to do. But just if you're at all interested in making one of these switches, like particularly these dryer balls, just know that when your things come out of, and I use my clothesline more often than not anyway, but it's not going to smell like you're expecting it to
Yeah.
smell. You probably won't smell anything at all when you pull them out of the dryer. It'll just smell like clean clothes, which for me is fine. But if you're expecting that cloud of what you think of as clean, you're not going to get that. You could put an entire bottle of essential oil on one of these and you're still not going to get that overwhelming fragrance. But I think you'll really truly find the more you get away from those synthetic fragrances, the more just a few drops of oil will be a pretty strong fragrance
Yeah.
and your body will thank you for it. So, yeah, and that's the beauty of the dryer balls is once you do start to kind of acclimate to a finer, more subtle fragrance, you have so many options.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have just the one spring fresh bounce dryer fresh or whatever it
Yeah.
is. You can use whatever, you can use a personal fragrance. I don't know, Joy, do you know if this Airex will counteract any of like because I know it helps air quality when you diffuse it. I don't know if it would help with the fragrance. I don't know. That was just something
Oh,
I wanted to ask
could
you.
be. I don't know. Oh, yeah.
Have to find out. So yeah, there's always, you can walk down that cleaning aisle in the grocery store and for every single thing on those shelves, particularly the ones that say have fragrance on them and you don't know what it means, there is a way to just make a switch to something
Yeah.
non-toxic.
Yeah.
So for cleaning your house, some water, some white vinegar, and some essential oils. You
Yeah.
can clean almost anything in your entire house
Yeah.
with that. Windows, floors, counters, there's always a way to, and I think it just smells so clean and fresh when you're just using those natural ingredients myself.
That's what clean smells like to me now too. And then you're not worrying about it absorbing into your skin. Like if you get vinegar and lemon oil in your hand, oh well, so what?
Yeah.
But with
Yeah, like my
other,
granddaughters, even, I mean, now they're old enough to not be wanting to drink things under the sink. They're 6 and 8 now, but even when they were babies, I didn't have to lock up anything away from them because there's nothing in my house that would hurt them if they touched it or put it in
yeah,
their eyes or drank it or whatever. And just the feeling that that gives you of not having to worry about the safety of the people in your home.
yeah. I was helping my cousin with my cleaning out my aunt's house recently after my aunt had passed. And it's funny you mentioned, not funny, about locking up cabinets. There was dangerous things in my aunt's house, like, and she to me was one of my role models for being like spiritually healthy and sort of natural minded, but and maybe her aides bought these products, but there was like scented trash bags. We couldn't even stand the idea. We went and bought regular ones. We're like, we can't use these to clean up. This old adorable tea kettle that actually was in pretty good shape. I'm like, oh, I need a tea kettle. I'll take that home. It smelled like oh, I just got a little
I know.
thumb.
I was like, where did that happens when I talk to my daughter on the sometimes it's like, where did that thumbs up come
That's
from?
funny. The tea kettle smelled, it must have been the dish soap that she used. It was so fragrant and strong. I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to throw this away. But no, I'm like, it's in really good shape. Let me see what I can do. And I soaked it with baking soda and vinegar a few times, heated it with water a few times, and it finally the scent got away. But those strong chemical scents just permeate anything and stick around and now I didn't say anything to my cousin, but my aunt's dementia could have been brought on by some of those things in her house. Like
Yeah,
just never noticed them in her
absolutely.
house before. So anyhow, it's just something to be aware of that it's dangerous for all of us, kids,
Yeah.
adults, elderly.
It's true. And like I'll walk up and down the street. I go for walks and living in the pseudo city, there's cars everywhere and you walk by and I would say 90% have those little trees hanging from, and I can't
Um,
even get into a car with those little trees. And
uh,
so it's everywhere you go, but there's always like, and you don't have to get super fancy or expensive and like the trash bags,
yeah,
they make those because your trash can stink sometimes. First of all, you should be composting your food, so your trash shouldn't
yeah.
stink. A conversation for
I
another.
know. Oh, there's a good point.
But if your trash stinks, all you got to do is get a regular non-stinky trash bag and put a little baking soda in it. And if you even that is good, but if you want to add a little drop of essential oil and shake it up,
Yeah,
that's going to help keep the smell down. In your car, if your car smells bad, just I think you told me this, put a little tissue in the cup holder with a drop of essential oil, or you can go like some of my other granddaughters made me the cutest little it's a little mini clothespin
wooden
with it just
clothespin.
glue like little felt balls onto it and you clip it to your air vent in your
Yep,
car. I mean, there's all sorts of really easy, inexpensive ways where you can, and ultimately these things are going to cost way less than the fragrance stuff
sure.
anyway. Like I don't have any idea what these things cost anymore, but I would think like a bottle of Febreze or of spray cleaner probably cost $10 or something anyway, whereas for less than $1, you could probably get an entire 16-ounce bottle of whole house cleaner.
Exactly. Yeah, so
So
it
it's
shouldn't be a
ultimately
money
going to be way
concern.
more cost effective. And certainly that doesn't even include, savings in healthcare
Yeah,
because you're not going to have some of the health problems that you may have if you're using fragrance.
right.
So the cost benefit goes way far beyond like buying your fragrance-free products. So
Yeah, yeah. So we'll feel better, we'll be cleaner, and we'll save money.
yes, yes, there's just all sorts of ways that you can get these fragrances. Sadly, you can't knock on your neighbor's door and ask them to stop using
Yeah,
dryer sheets. I'm like, here, have some dryer balls. I'll give you some if you'll just use them. Can't do that, but there are ways that you can protect yourself and change your habits and lifestyle choices within your own home, and if everybody would do that little by little, it doesn't, we sometimes get overwhelmed because there's so many of us and we don't think that one person can make a difference. But
right. It's like secondhand fragrance.
somebody once mentioned the actual percentage of people that need to change is actually very small to actually start making a change. So just start with one person
Yeah,
and the change can happen.
yeah.
So
Clean
So
up
yeah,
our
I'm going to challenge all of you out there. If you are a fragrance user now, are you at all interested in making some switches? And if yes, we would love to hear what they are. And if you are already a non-fragrance person, tell us some of your favorite ways to get the fragrance into your day without the artificial fragrance.
artificial man-made version.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. You
I
mentioned before we got on the recording, you found a Dr. Axe article. We'll put
Yes,
show
thank you for the
notes.
reminder. It's from a couple years ago, so not super old, but Dr. Axe did have a really, it wasn't his, he didn't write it, but he shared it on his website and talks a lot about what we've been talking about here, the actual dangers of fragrance and how they can harm you and how to make some switches to some
Okay.
healthier things. So we will put that link in the show notes.
All right. Great. And I just wanted to say thank you to the people who've made comments. It's really helpful to know that you are getting something out of our little podcast here. And we welcome share.
More hearts, Joy. I love that.
We welcome, go ahead and share this with somebody and subscribe and give it a thumbs up. So, thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. And we definitely hope you share this with friends and join in next time.